Osiris was the greatest king the world had ever known. So his own brother sealed him inside a box and threw him into the river. And when even that did not feel final enough, he cut the body into 14 pieces and scattered them across the whole of Egypt, so that no god alive could ever put the king back together again. He forgot one thing. The wife who loved Osiris would go looking for every last piece, and she would bring him back just long enough to make the son who would come for revenge. This is the murder of Osiris. To understand why this one murder mattered so much, you have to understand what kind of god they killed, so let me show you Osiris while the world still had him. In the beginning, the Egyptians said, people live like animals, no farms, no cities, no law worth the name. They ate whatever they could catch, and they killed each other over the rest. And then Osiris became king, son of the earth and the sky, the eldest of his line, and the gentlest thing that ever wore a crown. He did not conquer anyone. That was the strange part of him. He raised no armies and burned no cities. He walked out among those wild people with his wife at his side, and he simply taught them how to live. You do not have to fight for it. Watch. You press the seed into the black soil, the river leaves behind, and you wait, and the grain comes up on its own. There is enough. There was always enough. He gave them wheat and barley. He gave them the vine, and how to press it into wine. He gave them laws, and songs, and the names of the gods, and how to honor them. Then he left Egypt in his wife's care, and went walking across the whole world to do the same for everyone else. No sword, just music, and gifts, and that unbearable patience of his. His wife was Isis, and she was every bit as clever as he was kind. While he was gone, she held all of Egypt together with a steady hand and a will like iron, and nobody dared cross her. So there is your golden couple, the king who fed the world and the queen who ran it. And in any story this good, you already know there has to be a brother. His name was Set, god of the desert, god of the storm and the red waste where nothing will grow, everything. Osiris was not. Listen to them, the whole valley singing for my brother, because he handed them bread. Nobody ever sang for the sand, nobody ever knelt for the man who holds the border while they sleep. Set had watched his brother be loved his entire life, watched the crown go to him, watched the beautiful wife stand at his shoulder, and somewhere in all that watching the envy went quiet and cold and turned itself into a plan. He did not shout. He did not challenge Osiris to his face. That was never Set's way. Set smiled and waited and began very carefully to measure his brother. When Osiris came home from his long walk around the world, Set threw him a feast to celebrate. Of course he did. 72 men were in on it. 72 nobles and officers who had thrown their lot in with Set and a foreign queen he had pulled into the plot. Besides, this was not a crime of passion. This was a conspiracy worked out over months. Temena, and the centerpiece of the feast, was a box. Nobody would have called it a coffin. It was the most beautiful chest anyone in Egypt had ever laid eyes on. Cedar and ebony and ivory, gold worked into every joint, painted inside and out. Set had it carried into the hall while everyone was warm and loose with wine, and he made them all an offer, laughing like it was nothing but a game. A gift, my friends, this lovely thing, to whichever one of you it was made for. Come, lie down in it. Whoever fills it exactly, whoever it fits, carries it home tonight. What none of them knew was that Set had measured Osiris in secret, every finger's length of him. The box had been built to one body in that whole room, and one body only. So they lined up, playing along tall men who were too long for it, broad men who were too wide. One after another they climbed in and lay down and did not fit, and everyone laughed and the wine went round again. And then Osiris rose to take his turn. The best king the world ever had, smiling, a little drunk, happy to play his brother's game, he stepped into the beautiful box, and he lay down in it, and he fit it the way a hand fits a glove, because it had been built to be him. And the lid came down. The 72 were on it in a heartbeat. They slammed it shut and threw their whole weight across the top, while Osiris came awake underneath and understood far too late exactly what kind of gift this was. They nailed it down, and then so that not one crack of air could reach him, they poured molten lead along every seam, and sealed the best of them inside a box of gold and heat and dark. Then they carried it to the river in the dead of night and let the Nile take it, and the current pulled the greatest king in the world out toward the open sea, while his brother stood on the bank and watched the water carry the crown away. Isis found out the way. Wives always find out. A silence where a voice should be, a husband who does not come home. And she did not fall apart. She cut off a lock of her hair, put on a mourning dress, and walked out of the palace to look for him on foot, asking every single person she passed. This is the thing about Isis that the Egyptians loved for 3,000 years. She would not accept it. A god was dead. Fate had spoken. The case was closed, and she simply refused to hear it and went looking anyway. She asked farmers. She asked fishermen. And in the end, it was a pack of children playing by the water who told her which way the box had drifted out through the mouth of the Nile and into the open sea. The current had carried it a long, long way, all the way to the coast of Byblos, in the land we now call Lebanon, and washed it up at the foot of a young tamarisk tree. And the tree did an extraordinary thing. It grew fast and huge right around the chest, until the box with the god inside it was locked away in the heart of a magnificent trunk. The king of that country came down to the shore, saw this enormous, beautiful tree that had sprung up overnight, and had it cut down to make the great central pillar of his palace. He had no idea his roof was now being held up by a coffin. So Isis followed across the sea into a foreign court, and she did not come storming in as a goddess demanding her husband back. She was far cleverer than that. She sat down by the palace, quiet and sad, until the queen's maids came to draw water, and she braided their hair for them, and breathed the sweetness onto their skin, until the whole court was desperate to know who this strange, gentle woman was. They made her nurse to the queen's little boy, and Isis, being who she was, grew to love the child, and decided to give him a gift. She decided to burn the death right out of him and make him live forever. At night she would lay the baby in the fire harmlessly, to slowly burn away his mortal part, and she would turn herself into a swallow and circle the great pillar, the one with her husband sealed inside it, crying out for him in a thin bird's voice. Till one night the queen walked in, saw her baby lying in the flames and screamed and broke the spell, and the child stayed mortal, the way all of us are, because his mother could not bear to watch the fire even once. So Isis stood up and showed them who she truly was, and the whole court went to the floor. She asked for one thing, the pillar. They gave it to her gladly, and she cut her husband's chest out of the wood, and wrapped what was left of the tree in fine linen and left it for them to worship. And they did for centuries. Then she took the box home to Egypt, and hid it deep in the marshes, and let herself believe for one single night that the worst was finally behind her. It was not over. Set was out hunting that night by the light of the moon in those very marshes, and he came across the chest that Isis had hidden, and he opened the lid, and he saw his brother's face. And whatever was left in him that might still have been called a brother, went out like a snuffed lamp. Killing Osiris once had not been enough. This time Set was going to make certain there was no coming back from it at all. So he took the body and he cut it apart, not in 2, not in 4. 14 pieces. He tore his own brother into 14 pieces. And then he did the cruelest, cleverest thing in the whole story. He did not leave them in one place. He scattered them. He carried the 14 pieces to 14 far corners of Egypt, and threw each one down in a different place, a whole country apart. Let her search now. Let her wander the length of the river until the end of time and never once make him whole. There is no grave to weep over. There is no body to crown. There is nothing left to be king. He thought scattering the pieces would end it forever. That a god you cannot even gather back up cannot possibly return. It was a good plan. It was almost right. And when the word reached Isis in the marshes that the box was open and her husband was torn across the whole of Egypt, something in her changed. The grief did not stop. It just went cold and turned into work. She got into a little boat made of papyrus reeds, and she went back out onto the water, and she began, piece by terrible piece, to gather her husband up. Wherever the marsh grass hid a part of him, she found it, and at each place she stopped and she mourned. And some say she left a shrine so that every corner of Egypt would hold a little of the buried king. She turned his scattering into his kingdom. She found 13 of the 14. Only one piece was gone for good, taken by the fish of the Nile before she could reach it. So Isis, who could not be beaten by anything, simply made that last piece over again in gold, and made her husband whole with her own 2 hands. 13 pieces of a god, 1 piece of gold, and every scrap of magic she had set had left her almost nothing to work with. She was going to work with it anyway. But even Isis could not simply switch him back on. He had been gone too long, been through too much. What she could do instead was something stranger, and in the end something far bigger. She called in help her sister Nephthys, who happened to be Set's own wife, and who had turned against her husband the very moment she understood what he had done. He is my husband, and I will still say it plainly, what he did was an abomination. Tell me what to hold, sister, tell me what to do. I am finished standing on his side of this. And she called in a strange, solemn god, with the head of a jackal, Anubis, and together, over the body that Isis had rebuilt, the 3 of them did something no one in the world had ever done before. They wrapped him, every reassembled limb, bound in linen, anointed, spoken over, protected. They made the first mummy there has ever been. They invented right there over a murdered god, the whole Egyptian art of holding death at bay. And when he was whole, and bound, and safe, Isis worked the last and the greatest magic of her life. She turned herself into a kite, a small, fierce falcon, and she beat her wings above him and breathed her own life down into his still body. Not to make him king again, not to bring him back up into the land of the living. Just for one night. Just long enough. Long enough to conceive a child. That is the heart of the whole story. And I want you to sit with how strange it is. Out of a murder, out of a torn apart, sealed away, scattered god Isis pulled a single spark of life and made a son. The Egyptians called him Horus. And the moment that child was conceived, Osiris was finished with the world of the living. He had a son now to carry it for him. His own road ran the other way downward. But he went down into the Dua, the land of the dead. And he did not go down as a victim, he went down as a king. The I am not ending, I'm only changing where I reign. Let Set have the desert, and the empty throne up in the light. Every soul that ever dies will come down this river to me, and be weighed, and be judged. I am the first to die, I will be the Lord of all who follow. So the murdered king became the god of the dead, green-skinned, crowned, endlessly patient, sitting at the far end of every life that would ever be lived, the crook and the flail crossed on his chest. Set had tried to erase him, and had crowned him instead over a kingdom bigger than Egypt, the biggest kingdom there is. But he had left one thing behind him, up in the light, a hidden wife in a marsh, and a promise growing inside her that already had a name. Horus, and Horus was going to grow up. Isis hid. Of course she hid. She was carrying a child who would be, the instant he was born, the single greatest threat to the most dangerous god alive. So she took herself deep into the Byblos marshes of the delta, into the green and the mud and the mosquitoes, and there alone in hiding she gave birth to Horus, and began to raise him in secret. It was a hard, frightening childhood. Set was hunting them the whole time. There are stories of the boy burning with a scorpion's sting, of Isis screaming for help across the reeds, of the child hidden a hair's breadth ahead of an uncle who wanted him gone before he could ever grow. But he grew. That is the one thing Set could never quite reach in time. Horus grew up, a falcon-headed boy, and then a falcon-headed young man raised on a single story, told to him every night by a mother who would not let him forget one word of it. Your father was the best of all of them, and your uncle put him in a box, and tore him apart, and threw him to the river. You are what your father sent back. When you are ready you will go, and you will take back his throne, not for revenge, for justice, though I will not pretend to you that I do not want the revenge as well. And one day the boy was a man, and the man walked out of the marshes, and went straight up to the great assembly of the gods, and said that the throne of Egypt was his. I am Horus, son of Osiris, the king your silence let die. I have come for what my father wore. Give me the crown or give me the one who took it from him. I will settle for either one. And Set rose up across the hall, huge and red and completely unafraid, and said the boy was nothing. a marsh child that nobody raised in the mud. He said strength was what ruled the world and that he was the strongest thing in it. What followed was not one fight. It was 80 years of them. 80 years of war between the sun and the murderer. They fought as men, and they fought as beasts. They argued their claim in front of the whole court of the gods, over and over, while the old sun god who sat in judgment dithered and delayed, and could not bring himself to rule against strong, useful, terrible Set. They fought in the river as two great beasts, holding their breath. They raced in boats. Set tore out one of Horus's eyes, and it was healed and given back to him. And to this day the Egyptians drew that eye on everything they owned to keep themselves safe. The Horus took something from Set in return, and the desert god never fully recovered from the taking. And through every year of it, Isis was there fighting for her son with her wits, the way she had once fought for her husband, laying traps for Set with nothing but her tongue, tricking him again and again into condemning himself out of his own mouth in front of the very gods who were judging him. Until at last even the slowest of the gods could not pretend any longer. Set was made to admit it out loud in front of everyone. The throne was not his. It had never been his. It belonged to the son of the man he had murdered. So they gave the crown of Egypt to Horus, the marsh child, the revenge that Isis had grown out of a corpse and a single night, and a flat refusal to let go. Osiris got his answer at last. All the way down in the land of the dead, his son was king, and his brother was on his knees. So how do you end a war like that one? The Egyptians gave it the wisest ending they could imagine, and it is not the one you would expect. They did not destroy Set. Horus took the throne of the living, the green land, the black soil, the river, everything his father had ever loved. And Set was sent out to the red desert and the storm at the edge of the world, to be the fury that guards the border, terrible and useful, and never allowed near the crown again. And Osiris kept the greatest kingdom of the three, the dead. Every Egyptian who ever lived believed that when they died they would sail down to him and stand in his hall and have their heart weighed against a single feather, and that the good would pass through into his green country and live. Think about what that actually means. Set murdered his brother to erase him, and instead he made him immortal. He turned Osiris into the one god that every single person in Egypt would meet, in person, at the end of everything. But you could not have handed Osiris a bigger crown if you had spent your whole life trying. And Set handed it to him by accident, with a box, and a blade, and a river. There was a cost, and the story is honest about it. Osiris never came back up into the light. Isis won everything and got to keep almost none of it. A husband she could only ever visit among the dead. Son she nearly died, raising in a swamp. The good king does not get to come home and rule happily ever after. He gets to rule the dead. That is the deal the Egyptians made their peace with. Some things, once they are done, cannot be undone. They can only be answered. And this one got answered in full. So what is the murder of Osiris actually about? Because the Egyptians told this one for 3,000 years longer than almost any story we still have. They were not just telling it for the drama. Look at what Set wanted. He wanted his brother gone, not beaten, gone, erased so completely that there would be nothing left to mourn and nothing left to crown. And now look at what he actually did. He scattered his brother into every corner of the country, so every corner claimed him. He forced the invention of the very thing that would keep Egyptian bodies whole for 4,000 years. And he planted, without ever knowing it, the one child who would grow up and take it all back. That is the trap hidden inside, revenge. And the Egyptians saw it clearly. When you try to destroy a thing out of fear, you do not make it smaller, you make it bigger. Sometimes you make it a god. Set could have simply lived beside a brother. Instead he made himself an enemy that outlived him, a widow that outwitted him, and a nephew that dethroned him. Every wound he dealt grew back facing him. And on the other side of it stands Isis, and she is the real answer to Set. Not with an army, with refusal. She would not accept that he was gone, and she kept not accepting it. Across the sea, through the fire, piece by piece out of the marsh, until she had turned a murder into a marriage that even death could only interrupt. That is the whole thing in the end. A god tried to bury love, and love dug itself back up, made itself a son, and came home wearing a crown. Osiris never walked in the sunlight again, but he stopped being something that could be killed. He became the promise, waiting at the end of every Egyptian life, that death was a doorway and not a wall. The brother who tried to erase him is remembered now mostly as the one who failed to, and the boy conceived from a corpse became the falcon that every pharaoh for 3,000 years would call himself the living form of. So here is my question for you, and I really do mean it. Isis was offered the choice over and over again to just let him go, to grieve and move on and live. And every single time she said no. Was she right? Or is there a point where holding on that hard stops being love and turns into something else? Tell me down in the comments. I read them. This is the forgotten pantheon, where even the gods get murdered by their own families. If Osiris got to you, subscribe and stay a while. Because so far we have only heard Isis call Set a monster. Next time I want to give him the floor. The god of the desert, the storm, the outsider brother, and the case he would make that he was never the villain of this story at all. Come back for Set.